Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you. I haven't had the time to talk to everybody, but I'm really thrilled to be here. Alex asked me to put together sort of 10 to 15 minutes of my perspective or my view of going from a startup to a scale-up. And so this is Michele's opinion kind of session for 10 minutes to 15 minutes. But what I'm hoping is in the Q&A that we'll have some time to maybe talk about things that don't resonate for you in this or that don't make sense that you think should be different. And so part of my objective is to put some stuff up on a few slides, have a conversation about it, and then see if it resonates or not. The whole objective was really just to be helpful. So Alex also asked me to talk about what I do and why I do that, where does it come from. So I build myself out primarily as a fractional COO. A lot of people aren't really sure what that is or how to use it. But it comes from a career of doing operational kinds of things. So I started my career in operations in a large mining company. To give you some context, that was back in 1984. Computers were just coming into the corporate world. And I had just finished a degree at Waterloo where computers were everything. So I joined this company and started putting in new systems and re-engineering processes and getting rid of paper and automating things, and did that for about 14 years with them. Lots of systems, but always in a services world, so not in a product world. I moved from there to management consulting, which I loved. I joined IBM in the days when IBM had about 200 of us across the country doing pure management consulting, so not technology, but everything but. And the job there for me was around business transformation, companies that were looking to transform and take advantage of the internet and what it could be for them, primarily working with executive teams who didn't get it. They thought the internet was for the kids with earrings and blue hair. At the time, that was a rarity. And so they hired me because I had gray hair. Now, that was a long time ago, so I have a lot more gray hair now. But the idea was to put me in front of the executive teams to explain to them what could this internet thing do and how would it change their business models and their approaches to customer and how they created products. So that was a lot of fun. I did a lot around customers, a lot around strategy. And I ended up working with them primarily in smart cards and transit, working on the Presto bid here in Toronto. And that was amazing because I got to access IBM Global, which just blew my mind in terms of what was available in a company of that size. So that was a big departure from a smallish Canadian mining company, but a very welcome one for me, and one where I really got grounded in the whole idea of management consulting. From there, I moved into the innovation ecosystem. JP and I were talking about this. I started with a company out in BC that had a program that they had tried for 17 kids. And their idea was to bring international students to Canada so that they would consider coming here for their master's and PhD and then stay here and take that PhD experience and bring it into industry. That was kind of the second arm of what they did. So my job was to take this thing that they had tried with 17 kids and expand it to over 1,000. Today, I think it runs about 1,200 kids a year. The challenge with the program is when you're up about 500, 600, 700 people, you need systems, you need processes, you need risk management. We had to send letters to their parents to say that we take care of them. And then you realize that, oh my God, it's June and I have 520-something-year-olds who've never been out of home spread across Canada. So building the teams and the processes to take care of that was, again, taking an executive idea or strategy and figuring out how to implement it. And from my tax, I then moved to OCI, which is based here in Ontario. And the job there was around forming new partnerships with industry to develop new capabilities in the province of Ontario. So the biggest piece of work I did with them was working with 5 multinationals to pull together a bid to the Quebec, Ontario, and federal governments. The total value of the project was about $400 million. And the idea is what fascinated me. The idea was to bring 5G infrastructure into our innovation ecosystem. So if you were an entrepreneur, you could go and work with this infrastructure and develop your product long before 5G was here. So it's been up and running for 10 years probably by now. But at the time, it was getting the multinationals, which is a lot of fun, 5 of them, to write one proposal to 3 different governments. So each government had to have its own slant and its own ideas. So again, very internal focus, working with that team, pulling together the bid, and it was successful, which was a delightful win for us. So all of those roles are very internal. What's in common with all of them is taking something that the executive team wants to do and figuring out how to get it done. Most of the time, it's projects that go across lines of business. So if it didn't, then you would just give it to the VP of sales or give it to the VP of communications, and they would go take care of it. But when it's sales and accounting and finance and programs and everything else that you do, you need somebody who can work across all of those layers. As a result, it's a career that's a systems thinker, but it's very much focused on operations, how things operate, how things get done. So that's me in a nutshell, and that's why I offer those kinds of services to companies. So when I took a look to see, what's the latest information about startup companies in Canada, what I found out is that we have a lot of startup companies, 1.2 million, good news. 98% of those are small, under 100 people. So everybody talks about SMEs like it's one big giant group. Well, for starters, it's S and it's M, and then there's L, the big ones. But S and M are quite different. So a company that goes up to 100 people is different from a company that's between 100 and 500, right? And we're going to talk a little bit about what's different. But I thought that was a surprising statistic. And here's the other piece. When you talk about small companies that are under 100 people, there's a big difference between somebody who has 5 employees and somebody who has 50, 60, 70, 80. And the biggest difference in my mind is the amount of structure that you need to run that company. So I've had a number of conversations with CEOs where I say, okay, on the back of a napkin, tell me what your people are doing. And when you have 10 people, 15 people, they can do that. Joe does this, Mary does that, Susan does this. When they've got 50, they can't. It's no longer something that one person can keep in their head. They kind of roughly know what's going out the door, but how it's working inside that's a whole different story. So the conversation I have is about bringing in people like me, a team of me's, to actually put some of that structure in place. What are you doing for HR? What are you doing for legal concerns? What are you doing for marketing? How are you going to market? What's your key message? What's your business plan look like? How much do you want to grow next year and next year? How is that going to happen? Can it happen? A lot of times the growth plans are astronomical and that it can't happen with a team of 10 people, right? So that's a whole conversation about how that happens. And for me, the kind of work that I do, once you're in around 19 people, now we start talking about needing some structure. How do people take vacation? Do you want to think about benefits or not? Do you need management of people, or are you, the founder, going to manage 19 people? For most of us, the prime number of people you want to manage is around 10 to 12. And so if you think of that in terms of a company, you've got a founder, 10 to 12 whatever's in the middle that report up to that founder, and then each of them really should only have 10 to 12 reporting into them. So it doesn't take long before you start getting into big numbers. And the key thing is you need to get into some management experience. So the message is, it's kind of like a workout. So I shared with Alex, I started working out in June just because I didn't even know where the gym was after 6 years in my building. So I got lost with the trainer on the first day, showing her where I was. And I said, I just want to get stronger. It's really all I want to do. So the tools that I needed is just get me in there, show me this stuff, and give me something that I can come in and not have to think about it, because I don't know what to do. Very different from somebody who's already a pro. They live in the gym. There's a bunch of those that come in and keep me company once in a while. They know what to do. They're looking at growing and maintaining their strength or their flexibility or whatever. They know what all the machines are and they can pop around and do whatever. I have to take my phone and read the list of where am I going and how's that going to work. So today's 4 flights of stairs. counted as a bit of a workout for me. And so the message is you need the right tools at the right time. So if my trainer had taken me into the gym and ran me through everything and showed me all of the things that I could do on every machine that's in there, I couldn't absorb that. There's going to come a time, because every time I see her, she puts a little more weight, gets me using a few more things, but it's not at the beginning, right? As opposed to somebody who's already been there, the tools that they need is how do I take this machine and maximize my workout? So it's just a very different conversation. All the tools are the same, but you use them differently depending on what your objective is. And that's what I think companies are also doing. So, that's really blurry. Well, you've got the link when you get the slides. So Harvard Business Review did some studies back in the 80s of how to segregate companies. How do you categorize them? And I had never seen this before. And I thought, wow, back in the 80s, that's forever ago. But what I found is that when I started to research how to segregate or understand companies at different levels, they're using the same model. So even though it was 1980, whatever it was, it's now still in use because I guess it still makes sense, and it's HBR and they tend to do good stuff. So what I've done in the rest of this presentation is for each of these stages that they talk about, I took a look at, what's your goal, where might your gaps be, what might you need, where do you find it, what kind of help are you going to need and when. So they started with the existence group, which we normally think of as startups, a few people with a good idea. Usually what I've seen in OCI particularly is they've got a good idea, but they need technical expertise to grow the product, finish the product, do the service, put it online, do whatever it is that needs to happen. So a lot of technical people getting hired by startups. They might need some market experience because they may have not gone out to see if this technology can actually be sold, but they've got this great idea, right? They could use some business experience in terms of how do you build from two people with a good idea into a company? What does that look like? And usually they need some money because they've been couch surfing with their friends and now it's time to actually get an office or get a place where they're going to work and they need something to do. So what kind of help do you need at that stage? Mentors with experience and market knowledge. Oftentimes, I have a great coffee shop out in Etobicoke that I still go to for coffee. And if I sit and listen, there's a lot of mentors talking to startups, telling them what they need to do, telling them what their next steps are, who they need to meet, who they need to call. You need to sharpen your message. This is working, that isn't working. So lots of mentors. And there's argument over it's a mentor or an advisor. It's a little bit different, but in this case, we'll use mentors as somebody who can just help you to think about the sorts of things that you need to be looking at. Government grants are out there. Families and friends are your investors, so mom and dads, uncles, aunts, people who actually believe in your product or service the same way you do. The next step is survival. So now you've got to make this thing work. You've got to go to market. You're starting to gain a little bit of traction. Maybe you have one or two customers who are willing to pay for your stuff. You want to supplement your team with a few more people, maybe, some experience. Sometimes they're free. Sometimes they're coming in for future shares of a dream. But sometimes they're bringing in technical experience, all of those sorts of things. And what you're looking at is how to produce my thing at scale. So I've sold it to one person, maybe two, maybe three. How am I going to do this for 100? I had a conversation once with a guy he was very proud of himself. He created a 3D printer for, I think it was $130. And I said, that's fantastic. And he says, oh yeah, it's great. This is the best thing since sliced bread. He said, I just got a great contract. They need 10,000 printers. And I said, fabulous. How are you going to do that? Well, he says, the first year I'm going to be able to produce probably 50 or 60. And then the next year, maybe I can grow that to 70 or 80. Like it was going to take him 15 years to produce 10,000 of these printers, right? So you've got to start thinking about how to scale the product that you have. And that's kind of the stage that you're at here. Testing it with your market, what are you going to do with sales, and starting to get some funding to be able to produce that volume. So what kind of people do you need? Here I've said advisors, different from mentors. Advisors with contacts who know how to get you into the market, who know who's producing stuff. How do I get this produced in China and shipped to Brazil and then up to here as a final product? Not everybody knows that, but there are people out there who do. So they've got contacts, experience, market knowledge. You need some sales help. Because if you're busy creating this product and figuring out how to do it at volume, who's out talking to your potential customers? So that's kind of this stage. Again, there's government grants, more families, friends, and investors, angel investors who come in with smaller amounts of money as opposed to formal investors, all part of that survival stage. And then they've got success or disengagement. And the reason they have this as a category is because at this stage, the founder either decides I'm going to stick it out and grow this thing because I have everything I need, or they're deciding that they're out. They don't want to do this anymore. They'll sell it. They'll get somebody else to buy the company, and they can do whatever they want with it. But if they decide that they're going to be successful and grow this thing, they need to start hiring some people. So you need people who can produce more of your product or service. You need people with management experience. And I see this as the biggest hole because usually founders don't think they need management experience. And when I say management experience, it's about managing people. The day-to-day interactions, how do you keep them engaged in the company? How do you keep them wanting to work here? How do you make sure that they take a break? How do you make sure that they're loving being here so they're going to stay? We hear about companies who do that, but there's not a whole lot of them out there. because management usually is not seen as important for small companies, in the same way that change management is not seen as a big deal for a large company. And yet it's vital if you're going to try to do any kind of business transformation, right? Same thing, just different side of the coin. You want to have some structure in place. You start to focus on your finances, because now you have to start making money. Because if you're not making money, then what's the sense in continuing to try to be successful? And so you start to have to read financial statements. You have to understand how that's going to work. Where am I making money? Where am I losing money? What's it costing me to produce my thing? What's it costing me to get all these people on board? Focusing on sales for growth, and it's not the back of the envelope anymore. You got to be ready to go. And you have, which means you have to have a team you trust. So people you'll trust that you can delegate to, and I don't have to micromanage you. You'll do what I'm asking you to do. It's good. And by the way, you'll have your own ideas of what to do, and that's even better. And I have to be okay with that as the founder. So a different skill set, different mindset at this stage of the game. What do you need in terms of growing your company? An advisory board to help you make those big decisions, because you can't do it alone anymore. Fractional roles, people like me, marketing, finance is a big one that you see fractional roles for, who can come in to help you fill those management and structure gaps until you have the foundation of money and people that you can bring in somebody full time. Because senior people in any area of the business cost you a lot of money. So when you take someone like me, I'm relatively cheap because I can come in for 2 days a week, as opposed to 5 days. I'm not an employee, you don't have to pay me benefits. That's when you start to bring in consultants and fractional roles. And it's really, there are also consultants, not me, but there are others who can help you with production, right? The engineering type people who know how to get stuff, a lot more stuff out the door. At this point, you're probably looking at seed funding, Series A funding, right? Like substantial amounts of money, where a couple $1 million that you need to manage, which is why you need finance people on your team, right? And now you've got a team, so you need people management people on your team, right? All of that stuff starts to come together if the founder's deciding that they're actually going to keep going. If they're not, then they sell it off to someone else and they have that problem. But either way, it's a problem that needs to be solved if the company is going to continue. Then you've got growth. We all know what that is, right? You need more money. So we've got a well-established team. I need to be generating revenue. I need a sales pipeline. People management is in place. I have a plan, right? A business plan. A number of CEOs I talk to that have no business plan. Because they say, well, you know, I'm going to write it down, but it's not going to happen. It's all going to be oblivious next week. True, but you still have to have a plan. You're roughly, where are you trying to go? Otherwise, any road will get you there, right? And a product development plan, a customer service connection. You're starting to talk to your customers and get feedback. More feedback that you can use. How do you keep them happy? How do you keep them from going online and writing a whole bunch of trash about you, right? That's the name of the game at this point, because you want to grow, so you don't want to have a whole lot of that. So what do you need? Probably a more formal board of directors, right? To guide the organization. Because as a founder, you now have a whole lot more responsibility. You have a whole lot more money under your management, a lot of people under your management. So you need a board to make sure that you're doing the things that you need to do. And your board usually at this stage are people who know your business, know your industry, understand what you're going through, and can really advise you to stay on the right side of things. You want to keep seeking funding. There's money out there. It's not an easy slog to find it. And you want to start replacing some of those fractional roles or consulting roles with full-time people. And then take off. So at this point, we're taking off. It's going to be wonderful. You've got a team, you've got a product, you're following a development plan, sales and revenue is happening, people management, you have an executive team. So this is where it's no longer just the founder. You're the CEO and you have an executive team. You come in and say, this is what I need done, and they all go, oh my God. But they're the ones that pull it all together, right? And so sometimes when they're trying to pull it all together, they can't do it. And they need somebody else to come in and work across all of their teams because they're all busy. So fair enough. But you know, that's what you have, is that executive team. Governance is in place. Financial prospect is positive. It's looking good. We got it by the tail. So what do you need? Well, at this point, you bring in consultants. Not necessarily fractional roles, but they're consultants who can help you manage projects across the lines of business, projects that want to explore new markets, projects to bring in new technologies, all of those things. Because while you're producing your technology out the front door, you need a HR system, probably. You need a finance system, probably, to get the bills paid. You need some kind of billing system. There's a lot of that kind of technology that you want to bring in. And so you need people who can help you do that, because your people are full-time busy, usually. And so that's the message. From startup to scale up, it's about getting the help you need when you need it. And that changes at every stage of the process for you. So if you're a founder and you're running a business, these are some of the things to consider. And with that, I know.
I don't know if there was another slide skip.
No.
Okay, perfect.
That was it.
Thanks.
So, opening the floor. Does that make sense? Are there things that are in the wrong categories?
I have a question about back to management.
Yep.
And within your space, startups and all the rest, COVID, hybrid working, all these things, how is it different from your experience in other businesses and dealing with those kind of management issues?
So what I've seen with small companies is they couldn't care less. If you want to work remote, fine. Produce, get the stuff out the door. Have I got that right? Yeah. Small companies couldn't care less. Corporate companies are saying, I got this whole tower and 20% of it is full. What are we going to, we're going to open a restaurant? Like, what are we going to do with this asset that I can't get out of? And large companies, I think, are much more concerned with culture, right? So a small company, they'll meet once a month. They'll all get together and they'll sit around a great big table. The last place I worked, it was a startup. I rented an office from them and just watched what they do. It was mind-blowing. They just sat around a big table by the kitchen, and that's how they worked all day. And they made millions of dollars. So they don't care if their people are working from home or somebody is sick or somebody wants to go see their mother that day. They're fine with it as long as you produce. So there's this very strong focus on producing at the end of the day that I think is quite different in large organizations.
But how does that actually translate when you're actually trying to, create a business where you say, okay, there's more than 5 people, we got to get this organized.
Yep.
So where do you go from there? Where do you get them organized, however that
Yep.
translates?
So my experiences, I've been just as organized online as I have been in an office, but I haven't worked for a lot of corporate companies lately. I'd
on themselves to manage themselves.
Yeah.
And so one team will implement Monday.com, another team will implement ClickUp.
Okay.
And so it's segmented and not optimal, but that's what I've seen is happening.
So the team stays together, right?
The team at
Yeah.
least stays together.
Yeah.
But there's a dozen teams.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know what it's like now, but back when I was working with IBM had 320,000 people around the world. But my version of IBM was about 20 of us that worked in my sector. That's who I interacted with on a regular basis. So that's why I think, for me, virtual is fine. I don't care. But I know for a lot of people, the social aspect is missing. And I get that, because my best friends, all 5 of them right now, are people that I met in the 80s because we worked together in the same office for a year. So, I don't think it's solved yet. I don't think it's going to swing to one way or another. I think we're probably going to meet somewhere in the middle. Anybody else? Yeah.
I think it also depends the people you've hired, where they are on their experience level. If you're a small organization to go in medium and you're expanding your sales team and you're really hiring out of college graduates or university graduates, for them to learn from the environment is really important for your
Yes.
company.
Yeah.
That will bring the culture, and you'll see that your numbers will start increasing. Because I saw that in my previous company, they had really junior staff when the pandemic happened, and they saw the hit. And bringing them back was very hard because they had never worked in the office environment. And because you learn, most of my career growth was in the environment I learned around me. So that is also makes a very big difference.
Yeah, learning is huge.
And which experienced people you're hiring or you can afford to hire. So that also changes. And some of the companies, what they're doing is they're not buying the towers, they buy the co-working space or the floors.
Absolutely.
Or the offices.
Yep.
So if anyone wants to go and chat, right?
Yeah. Yeah, the learning is a key point, especially if you hire like a senior person who's really, like a really experienced salesperson who knows the art of sales. You want your younger people to learn from that, and they can't do that if it's not a person.
I have a question about that because in my previous position we had this problem working from home or at the office, and we had nice large two-floor building and they were empty. The issue is how we can build a culture that people can stay, like your talent can stay, because culture, and unfortunately for the startup, is not about having drinks and bars.
No, it's not. Yeah.
Basically,
That helps.
Like that. And we stop, and this is the culture. Oh, we have bars, we have fun, let's have fun. It's not like
No.
culture is not building,
No.
game room. It's not like that.
It's about having each other's back. It's about going through hard times together.
How
Yeah.
we can build culture,
Mhm.
we can keep talents to work in our company when we are all working from home.
I don't have the answer. I'm a big people person, so for me, I actually like being in the office, but I'm surrounded by young kids, 30-ish in my family, who can't be bothered. For them, it's just such a pain when they have to come downtown to see their team, right? So I don't have the answer.
Or they don't know because they aren't there, so they don't
They've
know
never
what
done
they're
it.
missing, so you
They've
can't
never done
install
it. That's right. I want to spend the time with the folks I went to school with. I don't really want to talk to whoever I'm working with now. Anybody else?
Maybe kind of adding a perspective to that, from a little bit from my experience in my startup as well as my friends who are like in large companies. In larger companies, the tendency to like get people to come back to the office is not so much about like the infrastructure and like the 100 floor building. It's also about in a startup, in a smaller company, the CEO, the founder, they put their pulse on everything.
You're all in it together.
You're all in together, right? In larger companies, you might be a team of 10, 20 people, but at the top, the managing director is really worried about what's happening in those 1,000 teams of 20 people each, because he doesn't have his pulse on it.
No, it doesn't. He
Right?
can't.
And like no disrespect to anybody, but the managers who are responsible for that 20% team, beyond the point, and I'm saying this with emphasis, no disrespect, but beyond the point, they can't care less.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, so that's the problem of culture, which from in a large organization versus a smaller organization is very, very different.
Yeah, and I think the other problem maybe for managers is that you were hired in a very different world. So, if I think of me, if I actually had a full-time job now in a corporate customer, I would have been hired in a time when I had people that I worked with every week, and we would have lunch together once in a while, and we would talk about big challenges and work together, right? Arm in arm, that's how you get to know people. And then you go through COVID. And how do I show that I care? How do I keep that team engaged? How do we keep doing that? If they're all saying, no, I'm going to work from home, I'm happy, thanks. A big challenge for managers today, for sure.
And I think